A new report from Equifax shows an increasing number of Canadians are missing loan payments as they also rack up more debt.
Canada is the highest risk country for mortgage defaults, according to the IMF's most recent report.
The Bank of Canada sees some growing vulnerability in our financial system, and that vulnerability has a face. That of the Canadian homeowner. Some have already been hit with sharp spike in their mortgage payments, and others will soon join them.
Imagine waking up one morning to discover that the hope of owning a home in your city has turned into an unreachable dream, a privilege only for the wealthy. This is the harsh reality for many Canadians, particularly those in vibrant cities like Toronto and Vancouver. Today, we're delving into the narrative of the Canadian housing bubble, the foreclosing crisis, and the potential consequences that might reshape the Canadian real estate landscape forever. It's a tale that needs to be heard, especially when there's no one to talk about the mental toll it's taking on Canadians. Remember the good old days when housing in Canada was affordable? Back in the post-World War II era, Canada experienced a housing boom, and the government acted like the knight in shining armor, introducing the Central Mortgage and Housing Corporation in 1946. They provided mortgage insurance to make home ownership more accessible, and past governments always rescued Canadians who were in trouble. However, this is not what we're seeing today. Then came the turbulent 70s and 80s when Canada had to endure the horrors of high inflation and those pesky rising interest rates, making some mortgage payments challenging for a few unfortunate souls. But still, the government was there to the rescue again. The next major housing crash in Canada took place during the early 1990s economic downturn. Back then, Canada was dealing with low prices for its resources, a hefty national debt, and a declining Canadian dollar. The potential for Quebec to become independent and a recession in the United States, Canada's primary trading partner, made the situation even worse. Then came the 2000s, and the biggest challenge came from the world economic crisis. It was almost as if the heavens wept when the 2008 housing crisis in the US sent ripples across Canada. But Canada bounced back, and housing prices remain affordable. Until, of course, the last 8 years, when the Canadian government decided it was tired of that affordability nonsense. The real nosedive came in February 2022 when the Canadian housing market took a sharp, sudden dive, all because the Bank of Canada decided to raise interest rates. It was like a financial horror story. Prices for detached houses, especially in the Greater Toronto area, tumbled by an astonishing $400,000 by September 2022. To make matters worse, the Bank of Canada pushed interest rates up above 4%, and this led to a nightmarish situation where mortgage rates shot up to over 5.5%. Borrowers found themselves under an unbearable weight of financial pressure. And adding to this housing nightmare, in January 2023, Canada made a drastic move by stopping foreign investors from buying residential properties for 2 long years. This was a desperate action to what had become a very obvious real estate bubble that seemed ready to collapse. The situation is dire, as Canada now holds the dubious honor of having the world's highest mortgage default risk, as per the IMF. But before we explore why people are losing their homes, let's grasp the bleakness of the foreclosure crisis. It's not just the soaring home prices, it's the mounting household debt that's pushing Canadians over the edge. Canadian mortgage debt now stands at nearly 140% of disposable income, with the total debt reaching a staggering 180%, an astounding 50% higher than the US before the 2008 financial crisis. This sets the stage for forced property sales, defaults, and crippling stress on the financial system. For many homeowners, managing mortgage payments has become an impossible feat. The Canadian mortgage debt service ratio has hit alarming levels, far surpassing what Americans faced at the peak of their housing bubble. What's more, Canadian homebuyers lack the security of long-term fixed-rate mortgages to shield them from rising interest rates. Lenders are sounding the alarm as more and more homeowners can't meet their mortgage commitments when interest rates rise. Major Canadian banks report that around 1/5 of their mortgages now suffer negative amortization, where payments no longer cover interest, forcing lenders to hike the principal and extend the mortgage term. And about a quarter of these mortgages now stretch beyond 30 years, a rarity among lenders. But why are the Canadians losing their homes? Well, in just the past year, mortgage interest rates have shot through the roof, making mortgages significantly more costly than they were not long ago. In January January 2022, rates were at a low of about 2.45%, the cheapest in a decade. At that rate, a $400,000 mortgage over a 25-year period with a 5-year fixed interest rate meant monthly payments of about $1,800. But with today's 6.49% rate, that very same mortgage could push monthly payments up to $2,700. That's an extra $900 every month. The Bank of Canada took an aggressive approach, increasing rates by a hefty 4 percentage points in 2022 alone. Consequently, homeowners with outstanding loans are grappling with substantially higher housing costs, and when mortgage renewals come knocking, many may find themselves in a precarious spot, possibly facing foreclosure. The financial strain is also hitting hard. Many Canadians carrying hefty debt loads are now at a greater risk of going bankrupt, thanks to the surge in interest rates, which sent debt servicing costs soaring. In January 2023, insolvency filings for both consumers and businesses saw a worrying 14% increase from the previous month and a staggering 34% spike compared to January 2022. And let's not forget the havoc wreaked by the recent health crisis on the job front in Canada. As the pandemic hit full throttle, the unemployment rate skyrocketed to 13% in April 2020, devastating households as businesses shuttered and jobs vanished. Although the Canadian labor market has shown resilience more recently, with 150,000 jobs added in January and a near record low unemployment rate of 5%, experts are concerned about sustaining this low unemployment rate, especially with efforts to curb inflation and meet the Bank of Canada's 2% rate target. The shadows of financial despair loom large. The housing situation in Canada is getting worse, leaving many Canadians feeling hopeless. Home prices aren't falling by much and people's incomes aren't going up. This means that homes are becoming way too expensive, especially in big cities. For example, in Greater Vancouver, the average home price was about $1.3 million in April 2023, which is 3% less than before. In Toronto, the average home price was around $1.1 million in the last part of 2023. But the average yearly income for people in these cities is much lower, around $135,000 in Toronto and $130,000 in Vancouver. This makes it extremely difficult for people to afford homes. Some experts say that house prices in Ontario and British Columbia will go down until 2024, but we're not sure if that will really happen. The government did try to help by taxing empty properties and stopping foreign companies from buying houses, but it might be too little, too late. We'll have to wait and see. Figuring out what will happen to the housing market is tough, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic and all the problems it caused. If the housing market crashes, it could mean people spend less money, more people can't pay their mortgages, and fewer houses get built. But it could also mean that houses become more affordable in the long run. For people who can't afford homes right now, that might be good news. But for those who bought homes recently, it could be a big problem. We're living through a very uncertain time, and it's clear that the story of the Canadian housing market is still being written. With the possibility of more foreclosures, many people might end up without a home, and the dream of owning a house in Canada could be slipping away for a lot of folks. It's a sad and uncertain situation that's far from over. The gloomy fallout from Canada's widespread foreclosure crisis is truly disheartening. As people find it hard to keep up with their mortgage payments, many are on the brink of losing their homes, pushing them closer to homelessness and poverty. This difficult situation also appears to be connected to a rise in crime rates, making things even more challenging. This crisis is made worse by the ongoing housing bubble, which is causing rent prices to skyrocket, adding to the burden and leading to a sad and tough ending. If you like this video and want to learn more about the housing bubble in Canada, check out this video here. And if this video brought value to you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. Thanks for watching.